Okay, forecasting is a very valuable skill to have no matter what you end up doing in your life. Eventually, somebody's going to ask you to forecast something. And there are several different ways of doing that, and we're going to look at that here today. All right, so we're going to use problem 41 on page 852. We're going to do a little more than the problem asks us to do, but I think by going through all these different methods of forecasting, we'll pretty much cover everything you have to do in your homework. So what we have here is a time series. A time series is just the passage of time and something that happened during the passage of time. So in this particular case, we have uh, demand for a particular brand of automatic dishwasher. So this is demand for the dishwasher, and this is weekly. And what we want to do, this is what's happened in the past. That's why we call this a time series. So this whole thing right here is a time series. Okay, this is the week, this is the demand. All right, and we want to use this information to forecast how much demand we're going to have in week number 11. And why do we want to know this? Well, might want to schedule salespeople or order inventory. So we'd like to have some idea of how much we think we're going to sell. Now, the first thing the problem asks us to do um, is to chart this. So we'll do it the same way we did it when we were doing regression. We'll just highlight this whole thing, and then we'll go up here to insert, and we'll insert a scatter plot. Okay, so there's a scatter chart. Let me get something that's a little easier to read here. Maybe that. Okay, so there we go. There's our chart. That's what's happened in the past. These are the weeks, and this is the sales. This is how much we've sold on each week. So we can look at that and we can see, well, it looks kind of random. It doesn't really appear that there's a whole lot of trend going on there, that the differences from one week to the other are sort of random. Well, one way that we could, the simplest way that we could forecast, and a way that's often done in business, is what's called using the naive method. And the naive method is just so if I'm forecasting period 11 and this column is my naive forecast, well, the naive method says that period 11 will be the same as period 10. That's a naive forecast. Naive not meaning stupid, meaning simple. So in this particular case, for instance, where there's not a lot of trend going on, the naive method is probably not a bad method to forecast. We could go back and see, for instance, how this would have worked in the past if we just copy this up. And we can see that if we did this in the past, for period number 2, we would have forecast 22, because in period number 1 that was our actual. And in period number 2, the actual is 18, so that'd be our forecast for period 3, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the naive method is just next period is going to be the same as last period. So that's pretty simple. All right, the next simplest method is called a simple moving average. So if we were forecasting, let me hide this just so we don't get confused. Okay, in a simple moving average, what we're going to do is we're going to do a 3-week moving average. Now, it could be a 2-week average, it could be a 4-week average, a 5-week average. 3 is common. And all that means is instead of just forecasting next period based on period 10, we'll take an average of the most recent 3 periods, 8, 9, and 10. So all we have to do in that case is just type in average of those 3 actuals, and we would get a forecast of 19.3. So if I click on that, we can see that it's averaging the most recent 3 periods. Now I could see what would have happened in the past if I'd used that method. I can go up here, and the farthest I can only start in period 4 because I need 3 prior periods. Okay, So now if I look up here and I click on this one, you can see that it averaged these 3 periods. And the next one averaged these 3 periods. That's why we call it a moving average. And the next one, these 3. So you can see that the average moves. So I'm always averaging the most recent 3 periods. Okay? So that's that one. Let's hide that one. I hope you can see that time series forecasting is really very simple. Okay, now this problem doesn't specifically ask for it, but let's talk about a weighted moving average. Now, lots of times, so if we're scheduling or if we're forecasting period 11 and we were to average these 3, 8, 9, and 10, then our forecast would be in here someplace, right? Well, if there was a lot of trend, so if we showed a trend here, either up or down, we might want to place more weight on the most recent periods and not average them together equally. So we can do that. And the weights are a matter of, it's a management decision based on experience. So let's say, for instance, we want all our weights to add up to 1. So we'll just say for period 11 will equal, parentheses, period 10 times, let's say, 0.6. So 60% of the average will be from period 10, okay? Plus period 9 times 0.2 plus period 8 also times 0.2. So if you look at that formula, you can see that really we're averaging these 3 together, but we're weighting period 10 more than twice as high as the others. Okay, so 60% for period 10, 20% for period 9, 20% for period 8. That's called a weighted moving average. And if that was the case, we would end up with a forecast of 20. Again, we can just copy this up and we can see what this would have given us in the past if we'd used that method. Okay, and I can only start with period 4 because I need 3 previous periods of actual data. And again, this is a weighted moving average, so it moves also. All right. Okay. Now let's look at, we'll hide this one, and let's look at exponential smoothing. So with exponential smoothing, we need to have a previous forecast in order to use this formula. So I'm just going to go up here to week 1, and I'm going to say that our forecast for week 1 was 22. I'm just going to throw that in there. Okay, and what actually happened was 22. Now in the next week, the exponential smoothing formula is equals some alpha. Alpha is a constant. Your book says in this case to use 0.2. So it's alpha, which is 0.2 times what actually happened last time, plus 1 minus alpha, or 0.8 times my last forecast. Okay, since my last forecast was right on, that gives me basically the naive method. But now I can copy that formula down. Now that I have forecasts, I can copy that formula down. And it gives me a forecast for every period. And so using, for period 11, it would be 0.2 times what actually happened in period 10, plus 1 minus alpha, or 0.8 times what I forecast was going to happen in period 10. That's exponential smoothing. Now, that smoothing constant, that point something, will be the higher the alpha, the more weight it puts on the last period. Okay, so if the alpha is 1, you'll actually get the same thing you would get using the naive method. Okay, so exponential smoothing is kind of another way of doing a weighted average. All right, so that's that one. Let me hide that one. And then finally, let me pull this graph out here. We're going to do trend analysis. Okay, so trend is just kind of regression with using the week as the independent variable. Okay, so here we've already made this chart. So all we need to do is go up to just need to click on the chart and go over here where it says add chart elements, just like before. And we want to add a trend line. Okay, and we want to add a trend line, which we did. So you can see it's almost horizontal, so there's almost no trend. Really, the changes are pretty random. But just to show you how to do this, so then we're going to go, sorry, trend line, and I want to go to more trend line options. And then I just want to display the equation on chart. And I can display R squared on chart too, wouldn't matter. And then close this. So here's my formula. So to do trend for period 11, I could just use my formula. So my forecast for period 11 will equal negative 0.1515 times x, and that's the week, plus 21.133. So using trend analysis, that would be my forecast, and I could copy this up, and that would tell me what my forecast would be every week. So I can look at all of these, and I can see that this out of the way. I can see that there are several different ways to forecast the same thing. Using naive method, I get 21, simple moving average 19.3, weighted moving average 20, exponential smoothing 20.3, and trend analysis 19.5. So the question now is, okay, I can forecast the same thing several different ways. Which one is best? We'll do another video for that.